You so much. I'm truly honored and thank you for your lovely words, Mark, of introduction and on my dad's yard site. I am truly honored to be here in this sacred Elul time as we prepare for the high holidays and also on this it's his 40th yard site, which is really hard to believe, but so deeply, deeply honored to spend it with you all in this beautiful kahila and community, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. So, my heart is so full of so many things at this time of year and at this moment in our history. All the beautiful contradictions that we hold all the time in Judaism, but I feel them particularly intensely at this very special and sacred time of year. So I've been thinking a lot about these lines from the poet Mark Nepo that come to mind and heart a lot. Everything is so beautiful, and I am so sad. It's beautiful weather here in the DC area, and there's so much on our hearts and minds. I know for all of us. So I'm thinking of Teshuvah in particular, of that turning and returning, beginnings and endings in this time of communal grief with Yizkor coming and our high holidays, and also personal remembrance for me, and I'm sure for many of you too, a lot of losses of so many loved ones in Elul for me. And again, I'm sure for so many of you. And it's also such a time of joy and of newness, personally and communally as well. With the new year coming and back to school, back to gatherings with loved ones and groups you may not have seen for a while, turnings and returnings, apples and honey and beginnings, which always bring that spark of hope that I saw a bit in the intentions folks were leaving in the chat a few minutes ago. So I'm reflecting on how we greet the new year before the full reflection on the year behind in our tradition, before our Yom Kippur, full accounting of where we've been and where we may have missed the mark, where we want to go forward. First, we celebrate that new chance, that spark of the possible and maybe of the divine. It's such a beautiful design and intention in our ritual. And mostly I've been thinking a lot about community. Ani lo dodi, bedodi li, that Hebrew phrase that's an acronym for this time for Elul. I am my beloved, and my beloved's is mine. For this sacred kadosh work of preparing for the holidays. So this weekend I had the opportunity to pray with my feet at a beautiful outdoor Shabbat service in a park pretty near where I used to live in my beloved Washington, D.C. I'm here in Arlington, a little bit away now, but I lived just a few blocks away from the park for nearly 20 years, long time. And it was tied to a walk that followed in support of our city and our nation and our community, really at its heart, and to seeing the divine in ourselves and each other. B'Tselech Elohim, I am my beloved, and my beloved's is mine. We're all created in the divine image. We are our beloveds, and our beloveds are ours. So part of the Devar Torah that was offered at that service out in the park on a beautiful, beautiful day on Shabbat by Rabbi Miriam was about Amalek, which can be associated with evil, with sin, with an enemy. But the teaching about was about the duty we all have to uproot the sin, not the sinner. And she asked the question, what rather than who is Amalek, and challenged us to ask that about how we can all do the work communally to move from sin, and how we also all communally have that chance to have a taste of the world to come as we do each Shabbat. So we have both that duty for the work and also those gifts of Shabbat, of all the good and the beautiful that's in the world. So at the service and the walk that followed, I saw a favorite shirt that I just saw once among all the colors and flags and slogans. And it simply said in pretty small letters, there's a chance for a better world. And that moved me so deeply. There's a chance. And I think I've heard Rabbi Mark say there's that 5 seconds of maybe. There's that just moment, that spark of hope, perhaps, that can be there, that perhaps we all know and can feel is there. And it can be hard. It can be so hard to belong to each other, maybe particularly in these times, or maybe it's always these times. to bring in God or the divine or something bigger and larger, more than ourselves, with each other and with God. And it's right here. On Yom Kippur, God's 13 attributes of mercy are revealed as he is, quote, in his throne room, with all the grandeur, but with also all the limits that might come with that. God may not be as approachable when he's on his throne. But during Elul, these same qualities are revealed in the field. They're right here, in plain clothes, in our backyards, in the leaves on the trees, in the words of a friend or a stranger. B'Tselem Elohim, God is created, we are created in God's divine image. He might be right here, ready to receive us right as we are. And there's a teaching by Thich Nhat Hanh in the Buddhist tradition that when you plant lettuce, if it doesn't grow well, you do not blame the lettuce. You look for reasons it's not doing well. It may need fertilizer or more water or less sun. You don't blame the lettuce, you care for it differently. So perhaps he challenges us with people and with God, we can care for each other, for ourselves more, or perhaps just differently. And that may sound very simple, and sometimes it has to me. It certainly has not always come easy to me to ask, what is my part in the evil in the world, preventing the evil in the world, or even in the line out of a parking lot, as I experienced last night. What is our part in bringing love, in bringing peace to the world that can feel so fraught? And perhaps blaming is what reduces complexity. Perhaps blaming is what's oversimplifying because it creates a world of villains and heroes or villains and victims, and it ignores the power we have to all be a part. So not who is Amalek, but what, to ask ourselves, to ask all of us, how do we uproot not the sin, not the sinner, but the sin? And sometimes we blame because we just don't know another way. We can't think of what another path would look like. And I certainly have been there many, many times. But that ignores a truth and a power that we are all bound up together, that we don't exist separately, that we are our beloveds and our beloveds are ours, that Selam Elohim, that we're all created in the image of God, the divine, and something more, and that that can be where we start. And so over this summer in my congregation, we read the Song of Songs together, and there was a loving debate, a teshuvah of sorts, a turning and returning that you might be familiar with, that sometimes occurs with more love and sometimes with more debate. And it's all part of the kahila, all part of the study and the work. And this particular discussion was about, why do we read this? Why is it part of our sacred texts? Is it a love poem between people? Is it a metaphor between humans and God? And I think that where we got to was that it's both, that it's a love poem, it's a covenant, it's a kavanah, perhaps practice instructions between human and God and human. Because the relationship, the sacred, kadosh, beautiful, and sometimes very complicated relationship that we have with God is the relationship we have with each other. V'Tselek Elohim. And we get to turn and return and remake that relationship in our communities in the image of God or the divine or the mystical, in the image of ourselves, in the image of that better world that we can imagine that is maybe already here with practice. So let's practice together. And so I invite you to just find a comfortable posture and see if you can find just a bit more comfort, more safety, more embrace from these beloveds and strangers and Kahila and ourselves, both the ones gathered here today and the ones we're carrying in our hearts, the ones we love and the ones we debate and those we don't know yet. So whether that's closing your eyes, sometimes I like to look around a little bit to find that space and that safety before closing my eyes, whether that's bringing a heart to your hand, to a hand to your heart or to your belly, or perhaps taking just a few deep breaths It might be another anchor, perhaps the sound, listening to what comes and goes, the weight of your body against the cushion or your feet on the floor. Just finding a bit more comfort, however feels supportive to you. And as we move into silence, thinking again, holding in your heart, turning and returning to Shuva. Because what would that be like to think of Elul not necessarily as a departure from ourselves to be better, but maybe a return to who we already are as individuals in a community whose energy is deeply connected to each other, to beloved community that we get to do again and again, just turning and returning. We'll sit together for a few moments. Shuva, turning and returning as thoughts and feelings and sensations come and go. Because Teshuvah is the story of meditation too, turning and returning, letting what comes come and go, planting an intention, a kavanah, an anchor, of that better world to come, and then letting it go and turning and returning to it as we shift and grow, allowing the energy of the Kavanah that the community is offering, that we are all offering to come forth. We'll sit together a few more moments. Shiva, turning and returning to that cold Dodi, that still small voice within each of us that knows there is a chance, a choice for a better world, maybe from turning and maybe from returning to what is right, to what can be, to a better world, even if just a taste that can't help but be spread to our beloveds, to ourselves, to our beloveds, to ourselves. Ani Ledodi Ledodi Li. As we sit just a few more minutes, holding that belovedness, that turning and returning to ourselves and to that beloved embrace. And as we begin to come together in our own way, in our own time, perhaps with your eyes still closed, listening to these words from the poet Rosemary Watola Traumer, which I first heard from the meditation teacher Tara Brach. This is called The Question. All day I replay these words. Is this the path of love? I think of them as I rise, as I wake my children, as I wash dishes and drive too close behind the slow blue Subaru. Is this the path of love? Think of these words as I stand in line at the grocery store. Think of them as I sit on the couch with my daughter. Amazing how quickly 6 words become compass, the new lens through which to see myself in the world. I notice what the question is not. Not, is this right? Not, is this wrong? It just longs to know how the action of existence links us to the path of love. And is it this? Is it this? All day, I let myself be led by the question. All day, I let myself not be too certain of the answer. Is it this? Is this the path of love, I ask, as I wait for the next word to come? Thank you so much for your practice. It was quite an honor to be with you all. And as we come back together, I think we'll have some time for the mourner's Kaddish and for blowing of the shofar together. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Jenny, for leading us beautifully today. And we'll seal the practice as we do, as you mentioned, an opportunity for those of you who are in mourning or observing a yard site, or if it's your custom to join in the Kaddish to do so. And if you're not reciting Kaddish, please stay present for a moment to support those who are. You can put the name or names of those who are honoring in the chat, of course, including Jenny, your dad, on the occasion of his 40th yard site, Yaakov ben Abraham Bachaya. Please add the name or names as in the chat as you like, either now or after you recite Kaddish. I'll blow the shofar after the end of Kaddish. And if you're joining me, please rise in body or in spirit, and you can unmute at this time. Gadal v'yitkadash
Gadal
shemei
v'yitkadash shemei
Yama Divra Chutei
Ramach Mafutei, Hayim
Chaye B'chol Beit Yisrael Galach
Galach
V'zman Karim Amen.
Amen.
Shmei Rabban Barak
Rabban Barak
Olam
Olam
Yomei
Amaya.
Barak V'Yishtabach V'Yitzhar
Yishtabach
V'Shamam
Yitzhar
V'Yaseh
Vishamam Yaseh.
Tar
Yitzhar
V'Yitaleh V'Yikol Elam Yimkol Birchatav Shata V'Nechamata V'Amiram V'Ama V'Ru Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Yisrael V'Chaim Aleinu V'Yam Yisrael Amen Amen V'Yaseh Shalom Yisrael Yisrael
Amen.
Amen.
As always, thanks so much to Rachel Hugan for holding our text space today. Thanks to Jennie Apter, our teacher and our sponsor, for supporting our practice today. And loving memory of your dad, Zichrono Libracha, may his memory be a blessing, Jenny. I'm going to put in the chat lineup of our teachers for the rest of the week. Tomorrow, Yiska Smith will join us. Josh Nicholson will be hosting. Wednesday through Friday, Rabbi Robin Damsky, Kohenik Asher Lefaif on Thursday, and we'll sit into Shabbat with Rabbi Shefa Gold on Friday. So wonderful lineup of teachers for the rest of the week. And it's really special for us to have this opportunity during the month of Elul to support each other and to stay focused on our own spiritual practice in preparation for Rosh Hashanah, which arrives 2 weeks from tonight. Is that right? Yes. 2 weeks from tonight. Oh boy. Yeah, we're coming into the home stretch. This is the 15th of Elul. Full moon of Elul was last night. And so we're kind of bearing down in our spiritual practice. And it's great to be with you all. Jennie, thanks so much for leading us so beautifully. And a couple of things. I want to, as always, invite people to share questions or reflections in the chat. If you have a question, write question in caps, and I'll try to work your question in. A couple of things really struck me in the teaching, and we definitely have to revisit that beautiful poem as well. It's a great poem for the season. It's a great poem, and it's a great poem for the season. Um, uh, I'll speak, speaking for myself, when I'm listening to a meditation teacher, it's interesting to notice how certain words sound louder than others. They kind of resonate. It's like, oh. And in this case, I would say the word blame kind of hit hard for me. You were talking about the inclination to blame. And I know that that's an inclination in my own life that I just notice the rush to assign blame. And maybe because I see it in my kids and I know where they got it from, it's especially painful. Something happens and it must be someone's fault. Who can assign blame? If it's not, sometimes it's me, sometimes it's somebody else. But it's a very powerful instinct. And I was thinking about it in terms of Amalek, in this past Shabbat's passage about Amalek. And for those of you who aren't familiar, Amalek in the Torah is kind of like the arch villain of the Israelites. And in this past Shabbat's portion, Kitetse, there's the injunction to remember what Amalek did to the Israelites. And it's described as basically picking on the vulnerable. So I think about Amalek as that instinct to pick upon, like there's something in us that is like like an inner bully, basically, that is looking for someone down the line, or some part of ourselves down the line to say, oh, it's your fault. And I think applying practice to that, what I got from this teaching today was, I really want to soften around that. I really would like I'd like to weaken that, or soften that inclination. I'm sure I'll never get rid of it completely. But I'd like to create some space where, you offer this basically a couple of things you said. One was just pointing out the interconnectedness of everybody. So it's kind of absurd to assign blame because we're all in this and we're all part of this system. So you can't like separate one person or one part and say, it's their fault or it's your fault, right? If it wasn't, it's all tied together in some way, so we're all implicated in it. So that softens it right there. And the other part of your teaching that that stood out for me was this question about becoming better or other than we are versus returning to who we are. And I think this is a long-winded way of getting to a question for you about that. About the question about, what does that mean? You said meditation and tshuva are very connected in that they both have to do with coming back, returning to who we are. I understand that to mean that coming back to our essential self, which is not necessarily how we often manifest. Like, I don't want to come back to my mistakes and repeat my mistakes, but I want to come back to what's under those mistakes with the assumption that what's under those mistakes would not make those mistakes if I come back to that deeper self. Is that how you understand it, or do you have a variation on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said so much that's resonating. So I'm trying to think back through all the pieces, but I think right, that idea, I've always loved the idea of teshuva as turning and returning. Just that idea, I remember seeing it as a kid, like turning and returning. What does that mean? But that's exactly how it works, I think. And I heard in the practice that Allison led on Friday,
Mhm.
about retroactive mindfulness. So
Mm,
you can turn and you can return and you can, there's always another chance. And that spoke to me about that 5 seconds of maybe that I've heard you reference that I think is from Talmud. Not sure the original source, but I really like that too, that maybe there's just a glimpse of a chance, or maybe if we miss the mark, there's a chance to do better the next time, or even a bit later in that moment, to catching those moments, and that we get this beautiful opportunity to turn and return. And I like that it's both of them because sometimes there is growing and there's shifting, and sometimes we need to turn a different way. Sometimes what we've been doing is missing the mark or might be missing the mark, or we think there's a growth, there's an
mhm,
edge there, and I'm feeling that a lot as I have a 12-year-old who's in middle school, and she is growing and changing into a person that might be a different person than I would be or that I was at 12, and so that is new, and to let that turning happen. But then the part that I was thinking more about at first, and I think could probably be its own teaching, is this, yeah, the returning, and it's a returning to this core of goodness, or yeah, Tara Brach and others would speak to that intrinsic goodness, that we all have, and it's certainly plentiful in our liturgy and our prayers, that yeah, we're returning to is that core self that in all of us is good, and in our community is goodness. That's just whatever you think of that, whether that's the divine or God itself or himself or herself, themselves, or this, just something bigger than ourselves that is present in all of us and then can't
mm,
help but spread and be more. So that I think is what's that hope, that spark, that promise of a better world. And I really like that interplaying with Shabbat, with the taste of the world to come. Like we get this
mhm.
little taste and it's so beautiful, and it's not enough, but it's a spark, it's a something, it's maybe, which I think is why, Rosh Hashanah is so powerful, because it's always been my favorite holiday, even though this time of year is very hard for me and very sad personally and kind of, I think, communally for many of us. But it's also so beautiful because there's that spark, there's that promise or hope or chance.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
lots
thanks
of
for
beautiful
pointing
things.
out. Yeah,
Yeah.
before we started, we were talking about I think you used the word bittersweet before we
Yeah.
came on
Yeah.
together. And I'm thinking that I mean for I don't know for I don't know if it's we're making it up. I'm making it up, but for many of us there are losses, personal losses, around this time of year that and even for us, those of us who don't, the summer's over. There's something about the day's getting shorter and and nature is, slowly dying here in the we're becoming dormant in the northern hemisphere. There's that bittersweetness of ending and beginning together, and something about that can evoke hope, right? That something new is taking shape in this period of the Yamim Noraim and in Elul. And it makes me think a little bit about this. I was struck also by the, turning and returning, and I'm thinking about whether are they the same thing, or that we're talking about something different.
Mhm.
And the way I'm putting it together based on what you're saying is I'm thinking about the turning, a little bit like I said in a conversation with, I think it was Rabbi Dorothy Richmond last week. Now again, it's all a blur, but I think it was Dorothy, about the midrash about Moses at the burning bush,
Mhm.
just slightly turning. There's a midrash that says that he only slightly turned his head to look at the bush, And
Mm.
then that began that process. So the turning is that movement in the direction of the willingness to look at, a willingness to look at something. And then returning follows from that, then you kind of move more deeply into it. Then Moses starts having the conversation, at the bush. But at first it's just this gentle willingness or inclination or impulse to turn. Maybe that's that 5 seconds, that
Yeah.
says that, oh, maybe there's a way out. And we so desperately need that now, when there's so much reason for despair. So it's also very moving that you found so much inspiration in that rally or demonstration on Shabbat in DC, where I imagine there's, a lot of anger and, indignation, and that you elicited hope from that experience.
Yeah.
What was that like for you
It
in
was
that?
very peaceful, and those sparks of hope, that was what was most striking. And I had, I've gone to lots of protests and marches and events in my city over the years, not just at this time. And I wasn't sure what to expect from this one because things feel particularly fraught. I don't know if they are, or maybe it's always times like these, I heard somebody else say, but what struck me was the peace. I mean, it's in a beautiful setting, a park I know well that is, and
Hmm.
it was a beautiful day. DC has had like just spectacular weather, just everything beautiful that we love about September, and a little bit cooler and bright blue skies. And what I saw was people coming together. There were other groups in the park before the rally began. Like there was the Shabbat service, other groups were also meeting, and then people came together and walked together, and there were certainly, you know, right. There were differences of opinion, to say the least, among even the groups in the gathering together. And then people gathered together and marched as a community and had conversation with their own kind of smaller communities, and then with the broader movement that we all were there. And there's something about walking, it was almost a walking meditation. The walking forward was very powerful. And yeah, I mean, there's so much to say. I was thinking about what you said about blame, and I know we're coming up on time, but right, I think that's so much easier, and it's certainly right now it can really feel like there's a villain and there's not villains, but to think about what your part in bringing peace or love or just that 5 seconds of maybe to the
Hmm.
world, I thought was a really interesting challenge, and it was in my heart and mind. And really, when I was there, I started thinking, oh, this is what Ani Lododi, what Dodi Lee means, that's like, I am my beloved, and my beloved
Yes.
is
Well,
mine.
you connected it with that, the Rosemary Trauma poem, which maybe, why don't we, if you
Yeah, I
would, why don't
think
we
that
end with that?
Rachel had put that in the chat, and I
We
can
did, but
also,
why don't we end with it, if that's okay? Uh,
yeah, let me call that
and
back
I'm
up.
gonna put it on the
Oh,
screen.
wonderful.
Somebody,
Yeah, that's
I
great.
think, Anna kindly also
Yes,
found
thank
the
you.
link, but this is actually from her Rosemary Traumer's website.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
it also has Tara Brock reading it. So how about that?
Yeah, that's
Right.
wonderful too.
Let's
And that's
have,
where
let's
I
have,
first heard it, actually. So
all
that's
right. Well,
lovely.
let's hear you read it.
Okay. So that, yeah, this is called The Question. And I do see this inscription here for Jude Jordan Kalush, who asked me the question. This is asking the poet. So all day I replay these words. Is this the path of love? I think of them as I rise, as I wake my children, as I wash dishes, as I drive too close behind the slow blue Subaru. Is this the path of love? I think of these words as I stand in line at the grocery store, think of them as I sit on the couch with my daughter. Amazing how quickly 6 words become compass, the new lens through which to see myself in the world. I notice what the question is not. Not, is this right? Not, is this wrong? It just longs to know how the action of existence links us to the path of love. And is it this? Is it this? All day I let myself be led by the question. All day, I let myself not be too certain of the answer. Is it this? Is this the path of love, I ask, as I wait for the next word to come?
Thanks so much, Jenny. It's
Thank
really
you so much. It's wonderful to
beautiful,
be here with
beautiful.
everyone.
Thanks so much. And thanks, Rachel, for holding us. As
Yes.
always, thanks to each of you for being here. Hope to join us tomorrow with Yiska Smith at our usual time, everyone. Many blessings. Shavua Tov. Take good care.